Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to start with some meditation. I'd like you to just please sit up as much as you can. And some of you are very familiar with meditation. The most important part of the practice of the posture is to have your spine as extended as possible, as if the back is straight. And the head is slightly tipped forward. And the palms are placed, right palm on the left, face up. The thumbs are touching. It's at a level just below the navel. And it's right against the body. So it keeps you erect. Make sure your shoulders are down and relaxed as much as possible. The eyes are lightly closed or slightly open. Focus towards the tip of the nose or a space on the floor in front of you. It's perfectly fine to meditate sitting in a chair. Just have your feet straight down so the body's balanced. And if it's possible not to lean too heavily against the back of the chair, your back will over time become stronger. But the main thing is for you to be comfortable. The meditation comes organically when we are most relaxed. Let's just start at the top of our head. We are going to take a couple minutes to move down through our body, releasing any tension we may be holding. So just notice right now your brow. If you're holding any tension there, and keep a normal, natural breath moving through your system, and allow any tension in your brow to release. Relax the back of your head, the ears, your face. And notice any tension you're holding in your jaw, and just breathe into that, releasing it. Lips are lightly together. If you find you're swallowing a lot, which can be a distraction in meditation, you can curl your tongue to touch the upper palate in the mouth. Reduces the production of saliva. Relax your neck and shoulders. Relax your torso, your chest. Release any tension you find you're holding in your back. Relax your arms. And release any tension you're holding in your elbows, forearms, your wrists. Relax your hands and let any tension flow all the way out your fingers. Relax your waist and your hips. Relax your buttocks. Release any tension you might be holding in your thighs. Relax your knees. Any discomfort you have in hips or knees, just inhale and just release the tension. Relax your calves and your shins. And allow any tension you might be holding in your ankles and your feet, and let it move all the way out through your toes. So often when we meditate, which is a great counter to negative emotions, the beginning is to set the posture of the body. Second technique, simple technique for countering negative mind states, is to set the posture of the mind. Set a good motivation. So in this tradition, we're focused on helping others. The way my teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, focuses on it, it's all sentient beings. The emphasis is on all sentient beings. Sentient, they have a mind, they have a consciousness. Imagine being able to benefit all living beings every moment you breathe. Imagine being able to do that perfectly, unlimitedly, without any fear or confusion. So the Buddha mind is able to do that. The fully enlightened, the fully awakened mind. Free of all fears, omniscient, all-knowing. So imagine if you could reach that place, then you'd be able to benefit all others unlimitedly. So take a moment to think about your purpose for being here this evening and set a good intention. And if it's possible to include that type of motivation that we do in our tradition, with interest to become enlightened or fully awakened so we can benefit all others, feel free. And take a moment to set a positive intention right now. going to bring your awareness right now to your breath, normal natural breath, and focus on the air just outside the nostrils, the space there where the air enters in and leaves the body, or focus on the rising and falling of your abdomen, whichever is more comfortable. And when you get distracted and you lose the object of the breath, simply observe that the mind is off the object without any further story, judgment, or elaboration. Simply observe like that. Notice, and then with gentleness directed toward yourself, bring the mind back to the breath. Now take a moment to notice what thoughts come up in the mind as you're trying to meditate. You may see patterns, They may be random thoughts. See if you can get a sense. Which ones would you call generous thoughts? And which ones maybe with a lack of generosity? Okay, I don't mean generosity as far as just giving and things, but positive thoughts versus kind of negative tendencies. See if you can place a percentage on these different types of thoughts. So the less than generous thoughts right now, maybe you have some concerns, anxieties, fears, lists, agendas. So one practice you can do right now, we're going to go back to the breath. If you have these negative tendencies that you watch pop up, could be other things as well that you might label negative. Right now we're here in this class, so you don't really have to worry about that now. You don't have to engage in those activities, and you can mentally notice it and then mentally put it to the side. And the meditation is simply to bring your mind back, focusing on the breath, not focusing on the thought. Okay, so once again, a thought arises, and then you say, I don't like the thought, I don't like that aspect of myself, this is painful, whatever. You don't need to worry about that now. It'll be there at another time to think about. Okay? Over to the side. Thanks very much for that thought. Back to the breath. Gently back to the breath. Try your best. So please relax. Slowly open your eyes. I just wanted to get a sense. I tend to like to tailor classes to the people that are here. Just like to get a sense of your background in Buddhism a little bit. Roughly, how many of you have a daily meditation practice? If you just raise your hand. Okay, so maybe some newer people. How many of you might characterize yourself as new to this tradition or so? Okay, we've got a mix of people. Okay. Sorry, not to put people on the spot. It's so interesting. I teach around the world, and every place I go, it's different, different vibe, different vibration. I used to live in Washington, D.C. I lived here for 9 years. And went to school here, and I worked here for some years. And it's, I know you're not all in the district or living in the district, but the kind of vibration, I think, from it is around. And it's a bit of a tough town, isn't it? Yeah? People are busy. And I was just thinking some years ago when I was taking the train back from Philadelphia to DC many years ago, and it was July 4th, and I missed my train in Philadelphia, and there was another train like 2 hours later, so I was waiting, and I walked outside, and over the art museum they had fireworks, so I walked out, there's all these people, I had never been to downtown Philadelphia fireworks, and so I found a little space, and I was next to a young family, parents and a young son. He must have been 3 or 4, and the father was trying to teach him how to kind of cheer for fireworks. It was very cute, and he was saying, oh, that was ooh, that was an ah. Sorry, this is a bit of a tangent here, but, and the kid would go ooh, and then they started telling me, they said, oh, you live in D.C., oh, we have friends, and they said to their son, yeah, Jesse, you remember, Aunt Shirley and Uncle Dave? And he said, yeah, Aunt Shirley and Uncle Dave. And then the father looks at me, and then I think the kid said, Uncle Dave. And then the father said, well, he looked at me and he said, it's just Uncle Dave now. He said, tough town, Washington. So, I think it can be a very challenging environment to meditate in, and a very important one, this area. So I really encourage you. What I wanted to then discuss, because there's different levels of people, have you had a lot of instruction about the mind in Tibetan Buddhism? I'm just curious. People pretty familiar? Some not, some are. Okay. So we're going to talk about the mind a little bit, and if it's a review for some of you, no worries. It's essential to talk about the mind if you want to try to work on countering negative mind states. So let me explain the mind in Tibetan Buddhism, which is unique from what we're normally thinking of as the mind. And one thing I wanted you to notice, when you just now, we did a very short meditation, okay? So in that space, and I just did a couple little exercises with you, very simple, okay, to start to give you some techniques, okay? So what did you notice, first of all, the very beginning? I said focus on the breath. What was happening? And the other thing in Washington is everyone is very, very concerned about what other people think of them. So they're not going to say anything.
Is that just Washington?
It's really not, but it's heavy here. I do find it heavier when it's very interesting, just the, So I just noticed when I said, how many of you are new or how many are not, and people are embarrassed to put their hand up if they're new, or, and it's like, why? It's just a kind of interesting thing. Our egos it's fascinating, and especially the unhealthy sides of our egos. The unhealthy side of my ego is extremely sophisticated, unfortunately. And it knows every way to get me and to keep me imprisoned. It's very slick, and I'm sure yours is not any different like that. So I have so many little pockets of places I can go and hide, and it tries to weasel its way out of certain things. And more now through meditation and my study and my practice, I've learned to start to let go of all that stuff. What people think about me, or what, because this is for your good health. If you're interested in good health, I think in positive habits and things, let's sign up, let's do it together. And we're all actually beginners, so I'm not really that different. I can say I'm a nun for 15 years, but so when you started to meditate, I'm just curious, any experiences, what's happening? What's going on in your mind? Boomerang effect? How many have boomerang effect? Mind can't stay on the breath, right? Very hard to stay on the breath.
Junk. A lot of things come out. When you try to quiet it, everything comes to you.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it?
No, terrible.
It's amazing. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to call you on certain things if it's okay. So one thing I'm going to say is, let's get rid of the word terrible. Okay, for a busy mind. Let's start some healthy, it starts with language too. It starts with language. And I'm going to pick on you for a second. What's your name?
Jody.
Jody? Oh, Jody, you're my host. How lovely to meet you. I thought that might be you. Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
I look forward to spending more time with you. Great. So Jody, I say God bless because she's helping, is your mother, right? You said your mother. She's helping her mother. I find that personally very endearing, and I kind of treasure caregivers. I just think it is such a thankless, difficult job to do, especially if it's a parent and somebody close to you. So she's doing that, but I felt somehow you didn't value that in yourself. Like somehow, because I don't know if it's valued in our culture, right? So then it mirrors back to you that what I'm kind of doing and doing this extraordinary kind of thing, a lot of people on our planet don't think it's that extraordinary. So then I don't feel that it's extraordinary, okay? So this is also about waking up to some cultural mores that I try to meditate, and all these things are going through my mind, and that's terrible. And you know what? It's not terrible. I find it extremely exciting that you notice that. So we really have to start, and this is about, you're going to train your mind, and you're going to familiarize your mind, and you have to do it yourself. I can't do it for you. And it takes time, and it takes effort, and it's years, and it's lifetimes, and it's so worth it. Okay? But we start with baby steps. So I had these things that I was horrible, and I was terrible, and I was useless, and I was worthless, and you know what? That was one side of the story. And that really wasn't the whole truth. But I carted that around with me for a long, long time. So slowly I really started saying, I don't need to say that to myself. I'm okay. I'm good enough. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm a Buddhist. I'm not a Buddha yet. I'm a Buddhist. I'm trying. Okay? So I am going to call you guys a little bit, just poking with you, like playing with you, not out of harshness. But watch when the language comes up right away is, for you to try to meditate, number one, is great. So why don't we start there? For you to show up tonight is great. But we don't give ourselves credit for that. Okay? So then I show up for the class, and she says meditate, and it's Friday. Did you work all week, by the way? Do you have a job? You work Monday through Friday, or no? In the back. Yes.
You retire.
You're retired?
He
But
working.
did you have a busy week, though?
Yes, always.
Always, okay, always. So you come to Friday. Are you going to have a little space this weekend, or no?
No.
No, okay.
Because I'm going to attend the class.
Okay, good. Okay, good. That's more spacious. What happens is, for a lot of us, not everyone works Monday through Friday, but people that do Friday, we're tired. We're tired. So you bring yourself here, you try to meditate, and then the other thing is we're busy. I teach all over the world. We're not all Americans in this room, I'm aware of that, but I teach all over the world. I think Japanese are pretty intense, some of the Taiwanese I know, many cultures, but we are one of the busiest cultures and countries I've ever lived in. Every moment's filled. We have some of the least holidays of Western countries. You know, I always love that idea. You make this deal that you get 2 weeks a year, right? No, isn't that the average in the States? 2 weeks a year? It's absurd. Think about it. It's absurd. I find it absurd. 2 weeks a year 2 weeks a year I get because I wanted my house, and I wanted my car, and I wanted my Wi-Fi, and I wanted my technology, and my dish TV, and because of that, I get 2 weeks a year of space. I mean, I get some weekends, and I get other things, but it's just, we're busy. So when you sit down to meditate, your mind is not just going to open up and be like, it's not normal. It's Found a natural thing like that. So we work with it. And meditation in Tibetan doesn't mean to meditate. The word gom, G-O-M, gom. This is a gompa. This room I would call a gompa. Doesn't actually mean meditation, gom. It means familiarize. So meditation is a form of familiarizing your mind. Meditation leads you to familiarize your mind with virtue, virtuous mind states. That's really what gom is about. And so a lot of our minds, based on the imprinting from our culture and our environments, families, things we read and study on our own as well, it all has an influence. It all goes in and makes imprints in the mind. Okay. So we're going to be skillful, and we're going to talk about that this weekend. So let me talk more specifically about the mind. Okay, so first of all, you meditated, did a little meditation, and the mind's full of stuff. Right? So number one, I started to say, when you're distracted, okay, I lost the breath, and I'm over here now. And sometimes those thoughts go on for a long time, right, before you notice. No problem, it's just normal. It goes on, all of a sudden I go, oh, whoa, wait. Okay, back to the breath. But what happens is, sometimes you have a not generous thought, I would say, and you go off after the breath, and then what goes on is, I can't meditate. I'm the only one in the room who can't meditate. I'm a lousy meditator. Why am I here? I have all these other things I need to do. You spin out. Okay, sometimes it goes like that. So I said, without any further story, judgment, or elaboration, this is something you have to get used to in meditation and practice. That's what we call practice. Okay, so the things that we are now good at, we practiced, didn't we? Some of you play a musical instrument. Any of you ice skate? Do sports? Do you remember, right? You practice, right? To get better at it. We practice, right?
Yes.
Do any of you remember, I'm really dating myself now, the early computers, the CRT terminals, what were they called? Anyway, I remember 1982, there was this thing, I had to learn how to use it with a job I had in Washington, D.C., right? And I remember when I was taught how to use it, I had a legal pad here. Does anyone remember these days? And the beginning, it said turn on. I'm not kidding you. And then it would have the next thing I did and the next thing. So after 2 weeks, then I didn't need this anymore. Then I knew what to do. So that's what you have to do with your mind. So I can't emphasize enough starting or making sure there's a consistency to a daily meditation routine. It's for your health. And it's a very hard thing to get started, and it's totally possible for you to start. Okay, so it could be 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night. Find a comfortable place in your home that is not heavily trafficked. Sit in a chair, make a space on the floor, however you like it. It doesn't have to be elaborate with a fancy altar. Okay, but someplace where you go, you get quiet. The phone is out of the room, by the way. Sorry. The computer's turned off. And you tell your housemates, if you live with anyone, your spouse, your kids, that I'm going to have my time. You call it whatever you want. I'm going to meditate now. I don't want to be disturbed for 15 minutes. And you could start, you might find a poem you liked in a magazine that inspired you, a prayer from a prayer book, and you maybe read something, have a little motivation. This is for me to get healthy so I can benefit others. Put it in your own words. Close your eyes, follow the breath. Right? And then from there, especially next weekend, we're going to do other meditations you can fold into the practice. And I'll also, if you're interested in a daily practice, I'll recommend some books and some things you can do. But it's helpful because what you have to do to counter negative emotions is you've got to start to get to know your mind. And that means all the gunky stuff as well. Especially that stuff. Okay, and I have to peacefully get to know that stuff. Okay, I'm not jamming, and I'm not hating myself. Okay, because when I said you're off on the distraction, and so I've learned to now, I watch the distraction, and there goes another bubble. Oh, I don't need to have some sweeping negative thing that I'm terrible. It's just like, distracted, back to the breath. And then I said, with gentleness directed towards yourself, back to the breath. What a lot of people do, and especially Americans, are like this weekend, meditation is like, it's not serious business like that. So one of my teachers, this incredible being, Reba Rinpoche, this man here, he was amazing. And the last time I spoke to him, he was in Virginia. I remember he was staying here, I think teaching at the center. His reincarnation is now 9 years old. So he did a retreat with 21 of us once, and he said, he interjected suddenly in the middle of a talk in Tibetan, and he said, in order to meditate, you have to thoroughly disengage your nervous system. And you have to really be relaxed, and then it comes organically. So this whole jamming of seriousness, and you yell at your spouse because you're going to go meditate. Shut up, I'm meditating. No, that's not meditation. Okay, so sometimes humor's a great thing with it. Be humorous with yourself. Okay, so when you notice a squeezed thought, sometimes I talk to my delusions. Geez, who do you think you are? Or oh my gosh, I'm so irritated at this guy right now. I'm just saying that to myself inside. Somebody comes in, they disturb you. Does this ever happen to you this week? No, right? Of course it happens. Somebody comes in, my practice is whatever's walking toward me at any moment. Okay? Somebody comes in front of your space, you don't like them. You have history, they harmed you, whatever. Why don't we just watch irritation arise in the mind without having to get thoroughly engaged in it? It's much more interesting. Why? Because I have space from the delusion. I'm going to explain more about what I mean by delusion, but I have space from it. I have irritation in my mind sometimes, but I'm not an irritated person. See, it's different. You're de-identifying with the emotion. It's another technique. It's another antidote to use. And you're never really bored again, because you can always watch your mind. And I'll watch my mind, just driving down here. It's about 3 hours, and I just watched, and I watched people zipping by me. Then I watched me speeding up, trying to keep pace, then trying to pass a truck, and then suddenly confused which lane I was supposed to be in, and I'm just the whole time a little bit more observant of then I put the radio on at one point, and then all of a sudden I got too distracted by that because I needed to pay attention, and so you just see kind of what's happening. There's space in the mind sometimes, and then sometimes no space, and then it opens up again, and sometimes we have a whole day where there's no space, and that's painful. But it's painful, and I watch the pain. Okay, so instead of running and escaping from things like that, from the uncomfortable, what I found is a lot of spiritual practice is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that has come from meditation. So when some really negative thoughts come through my mind now, and now I can a little bit stop my speech from then acting. But let's say I say some snippy remark to somebody. I lose my patience, and it happens. Just because I'm a nun doesn't mean I don't get angry, right? But first of all, I'm better able to catch it before it happens. But if it happens, I'm kind of like, okay, you can always apologize to someone, or I just watch, wow, I'm getting really irritated right now. What's happening for me? Maybe I should breathe. It's a great help, breathing. We know this already. I'm not telling you I'm not telling you many things you don't already know. Okay? When you get stressed, you start shallow breathing. So you're not getting oxygen that you need to create more space in the mind. So what if you just take a deep breath? And what I found is by the end of the third deep breath, I'm starting to gain perspective. I didn't have it in the beginning, but now there's no problem with, you're allowed to take breaths. You're doing it anyway, why don't you take a deeper breath? Sometimes our culture is motoring through stuff. I don't buy into it anymore, that I have to get up to that pace. It's not that healthy. And I find when I do get stressed, I was just running this center in Vermont. It was very stressful. People find that funny. Dharma center? It's stressful? We used to hire people. I ran 2 residential retreat centers, so we had a staff living there. And the place in California, we had sometimes 7 to 9 people working there full time. And when we would hire someone new, they did a group interview with the staff. And people would ask, why do you want to live here? And I used to love the response, I want to live in a really peaceful place where everyone gets along. And we used to say, take it down the road. Okay, so Dharma centers are boiling cauldrons, but very dynamic and wonderful ones, where people get to do more practice. Because if you're at IBM, okay, they expect you to work in a certain way, and when delusions come up in your mind, you can't kind of go to your coworker and talk about them that often. A little bit you can, but not often. Okay? So Dharma centers allow that kind of stuff where we work on those problems with people, and they're places of deep purification, so you can almost accelerate your path a little bit. I think working at Dharma centers. And it doesn't mean they're not brilliant, beautiful places, and they are very peaceful, but a lot of stuff comes up for people. So I think it's helpful when we're noticing in whatever situation we're in that what is coming up, being able to observe what's coming up before we react. And often it's negatively at that time, if we're stressed and things like that. So you are allowed to take a deep breath, and I was running the center in Vermont, which I said was very stressful. And normally when you're stressed, you start speeding up and the shallow breathing, and you're trying to get more done, but I'm missing stuff, and I drop my mindfulness because I'm racing. I'm partly racing from the stress that's going on, so it's not an organized. With stress, there's no organization. It's just this negative looping, cycling of, panic to somehow. So what I started to do is train myself to slow down. And I had this little mantra, when I get stressed, I slow down. When I get stressed, I slow down. And I kind of taught myself that for a period of time, some months. And I noticed it started working where I started to get stressed and I would slow down, which seems counterproductive, right? But once I slowed down, I realized, what are the things that I have to do? First of all, what's the stress about? I could identify it, clearly see, okay, then how can I fix it? And then I would take actions. What are the actual steps? If I needed to, I would write down, these are the things I'm trying to accomplish right now. Okay? These other things I can't accomplish today. Can't do it, that's unreasonable. So those had to be left. And then somehow I was able to slowly, one thing at a time, go through the things, and I always ended up getting much more done. So the point is not always to get things done. It's a lot is to be. How are we being when we're doing? And I was on retreat a lot of this past year, and not a lot of the past year, 4.5 months, and I was reading this wonderful book by Trungpa Rinpoche, an old book of his on meditation that I found in the library. I was at Laudo, a place in Nepal, and he talks about the actual state of meditation. We think we're meditating. And he said it's not really a verb like that, an ing word. He says you are being in meditation. So a lot of times I like to take my yogini mind, the mind of the meditator, with me when I'm driving, when I'm working, when I'm in front of the computer, when I'm cooking, whatever you're doing, how am I being? And meaning, what is my attitude as well? And so, as soon as I go back to reestablish my motivation, which you can do several times a day, I especially like to do it when I'm getting stressed or tense or have a negative mind state or I'm angry. It's like, I get angry and then I think, in the morning I signed up to benefit all living beings. So what happened now? All living beings except this guy? Right? That's what happens. So then I have to reestablish, and I go, especially this guy. because I'm so challenged. This guy's actually a treasure because now I'm looking at my practice. They just poked me to remind me about my practice. Okay, so I'm just kind of layering things on to explain a little bit of that process when you start to meditate and the mind is full of these things. And you notice my mind is full of things, and breathe, and back to the breath. Right? Like that, and back to the breath. So it's like, yes, there's the clutter, and that's the beginning for us, that's the beginning of meditation. Is you bring the mind back. And now I'm all scattered on those other things. Bring the mind back. Okay. Like that. So the mind in Tibetan Buddhism, and you also learn a lot about cultures based on the language, the etymology. We know in North America, Eskimos have many words for snow, so obviously it tells us that they live in a cold, snowy place. In Tibetan Buddhism, in Tibetan, there's many words for mind. And a lot of this is a study of the mind. So what we mean by mind is different from what we normally think of the mind. We often think it's the brain when we talk about mind, often in Western culture. And please jump in if you have things from your study of neurological sciences and things. And
all I can do is agree with you, although there's a huge discussion out there in that world as to whether the brain is the mind. The science hasn't quite caught up to showing that the brain is the mind. And there's a lot of people who are in clinical practices, psychiatrists and psychologists, who treat the individuals who have minds and not just brains. The idea of the biology, the brain is the biology. And,
yes.
And limiting a person to their biology is missing a huge part of who we are.
Right, and there's a lot of studies done right now. There's the Mind Life conferences, if you're familiar with those. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is really interested in talking with scientists and psychologists and neuroscientists just about these specific things, and they're finding more of the things I've been reading, and I will bring these in this weekend from a little bit from neuroscience. And feel free at that point, you might want to comment more about from your background. So we're talking about two distinct things, and in Tibetan Buddhism, the mind is not seen as physical. And this is what's hard for us as linear thinkers to understand, that there's this non-matter, non-material thing. It has no color, no shape, no odor. You cannot cut the body open and see the mind in Tibetan Buddhism. And the mind is said to be located at the heart center, not the organ, the heart, but in a subtle energy network. And this energy network has these energy centers called chakras. Chakras. Chakras or chakras. They're pronounced different ways. And there's one at the crown, one at the throat, one at the heart, the navel, the sexual organs, and there's also subtle energy centers that branch out from those. So I'm just giving you kind of the major ones. There's different systems. The Hindu Ayurvedic system has a slightly similar but also different approach of it. People have heard of Kundalini, and this is all using kind of subtle energy, and this is something that Tantra in Tibetan Buddhism uses as well. So the mind at the heart center is located in this subtle energy system in the center of the chakra at the heart, in an indestructible drop in its most subtle form. And the mind exists in a most subtle form, in a clear light nature. It exists in a subtle form, and it exists in a gross form. So gross mind are things we can track, gross moments of mind, okay? And this mind that I want to talk about is made up, has two distinct qualities, and that's all. It's clear, and it's knowing. It's clear and it's knowing. It has a clear, light, luminous nature, okay, and it knows things. It's aware of things. That's your mind. Not busyness, not clutter, not anxiety, not depression, not hatred. Okay, those are delusions, and I'll also call them the same word, afflicted emotions. It's something that disturbs or afflicts, covers over or obscures, all the same word, okay, your sense of that clear light nature of your mind, the spacious, luminous quality that knows things. That's what a delusion is. It obscures that. Fundamentally also, we have Buddha nature. We have a seed or potential in everyone with a mind. In fact, the mind contains that ultimate seed potential that can ripen into a fully realized being. Everyone with a mind has that. Tibetan Buddhism says down to a single cell organism. Okay, so ISIS fighters and ISIS terrorists, they have Buddha nature. Yes, they do, according to Tibetan Buddhism. And what it means, it's a potential that can awaken into a fully realized being. And you say, well, why do they want to kill people? We all have our own, our own level of delusion. And I can't really speak for their mind unless I'm clairvoyant and know their mind. There could be a bodhisattva among them, seriously. Now you might say, she's nuts. There could be a bodhisattva among them that might try to have some positive influence on them. There could be somebody in there who feels coerced but they're trying to go along. Like that. You don't know until you know somebody's mind. So in one level, another way to counter some of your negative mind states is to look at your judgments. We judge a lot of things. Do you really know? And if you're not clairvoyant, how do you know? Okay. Now I know it's a natural thing, the quality to judge. I mean, it just comes up for some people quite naturally. And as Americans, and again, we're not all Americans here, but we're one of the most opinionated cultures I've ever been in. Like, we have an opinion about everything. And in some level, I find it wonderful and refreshing because we are free to speak about anything and to hold an opinion about anything. Yes?
We tend to use the word judge to mean judgmental, and I think those are very different mental states.
Yes. Yes, I mean, there's a negative sense of it, and then there's also when we're being aware of something, right?
Yeah.
Would you say like that? That would, I'd say that'd be our awareness.
Yeah.
And we all have many awarenesses as well. What happens, I find, one thing that's helpful for me with my mind is to acknowledge more and more, in a sense of what I'd say getting real with myself, that I am only seeing and experiencing things based on my perspective of them. Would you agree with me? Okay? So everyone has a different perspective. And as long as I am unenlightened, okay, that perspective for me will always be limited. Okay, so from that sense, I've got some limits on what I see, and also limits based on karma of how I experience things. Whether you like tomatoes or not. Okay? Is it the tomato that's so wonderful if you like them? What about people that don't like them? It's not from the tomato side. Okay, it just happens to be my perspective based on karmic seeds in that mind that create my reality. How do the karmic seeds get in there? Karma means action. Okay? Everything I think, do, and say leaves an imprint in my consciousness right now. Okay? And it's been going on, okay, in the past, and that causes me to experience certain things. Those imprints are in there. Okay, so I'll talk about that a little later or tomorrow. Okay, yes, question?
Could you expand on the connection between the mind and the chakras and the subtle bodies, I guess?
I don't have a whole lot more I wanted to say about that with the subtle energy network. The mind is technically located in its most subtle form again in the center of the heart chakra where there's what's called an indestructible drop.
But it's a form of energy, right?
It's a form of energy. So the mind actually...
You can't say it doesn't have a physical or energetic component to it.
I'll put it this way. It is indivisible with the most subtle wind. And the most subtle wind is seen more as an energy. In Tibetan it's called lo-jong. In the Chinese system it would be called qi. The Hindu system, Ayurvedic system, it would be called prana. So that actually is a physical form, the most subtle wind, and that creates the body. And what happens is the most subtle mind has a way that it's indivisible with this most subtle wind, but it's separate from it, distinct. And it mounts that wind like a rider on a horse and rides along in that form together. And then when the most subtle wind... So what happens is, first when you the fetus is in there developing and fertilization takes place, let's say in the form of a human, we know that the egg and sperm come together. They are physical in basis. Would you agree? Because you can look at them under a microscope, right?
That's the word we use to describe that phenomenon.
Yes.
Physical.
So do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms that we can perceive it.
That you can perceive it.
Our senses are technological instruments.
But the, sorry, the what
I
are?
said it's physical in the sense that we can perceive it with human senses.
Yes.
Or technological.
Technological stuff, like a microscope or something. Okay. So what Tibetan Buddhism says, and I'm just giving you information according to Tibetan Buddhism. So please, you don't need to be a Buddhist. I'm not going to convince you of anything. I'm just giving you information. If you do find the information helpful for you, great. If not, I'd say just put it to the side. But a lot of this, what I liked about this form of Buddhism, is it has to be your experience. So I really do ask you to be discerning and investigate thoroughly everything I'm saying. Really check it out for yourself. So the most subtle wind is what allows this fertilization to take place. And in a sense, we would say it causes the body. It is physical in nature, and physical things cause other physical things. Okay? So what happens with the subtle wind that's inseparable from this most subtle mind, in this most subtle form, is then it's in this indestructible drop. Okay? And then from that, the fetus starts to form, and we know from matter that the cells start to replicate immediately with fertilization. So you've got the body replicating, creating form. The form is starting to develop. And what happens with that most subtle wind is it changes and starts to develop into what I would call subtle winds. Okay, and what subtle winds do, upward moving subtle winds that are all contained first in this indestructible drop until it starts to develop further, and that remains in the center of that heart chakra, of that fetus, is subtle winds, upward moving subtle winds allow me to speak, to cry, to turn my head, to chew food, to swallow, like that. Okay? Downward voiding subtle winds allow me to eliminate waste from the body, sit down, walk, have sexual orgasm, things like that. Okay? And then they change as that form continues, that physical form continues to develop. It then changes into when the baby finally comes out, there's a gross wind. And the baby cries, or this is a gross wind. Because you can hear it and you can see it, like that. So the mind also exists on those levels. And so as far as other subtle things, do you have any specific questions about?
Well, I mean, there's various systems of organizing the various winds or dimensions, I guess. Like there's different systems to say there's 5 dimensions or 7 or 8.
I'm not familiar with dimensions I'm not sure what you mean by dimensions.
Well, different states of consciousness that correlate with different states of energy.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that, unless you have
Well,
something specific about it.
Well, for example, there's like the physical body, the gross body, and the subtle body.
Right. Yes.
Those are different states of energy in consciousness.
Yes.
But it's one system, one interconnected system.
Okay, it's an interconnected system, but Tibetan Buddhism would make it distinctly separate as well.
Interconnected, but each with their own autonomy, but
Yes.
still interconnected.
Yes.
It's one system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spectrum, and the deeper you go in the spectrum of consciousness, you get to the source. Well, at least that's my belief. The source of who you are.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the path to the Buddha mind. You have to go through that path.
Sure, I would say that through deeper and deeper meditation. And for instance, on our path, I'll give you an example. I don't know how much, are you pretty familiar with the Lamrim and this type of tradition? I'm not sure what kind of practice you've been doing, so.
No, I'm not.
I'm just trying to get a little bit more.
No, I'm not familiar with the terminology.
Okay, that's okay, but you've obviously got some background. I was just trying to get a context of what you've been studying or things like that to try to place it in a certain context. So in our tradition, we've got something called the Lamrim, which is the basis of the philosophy. And that Lamrim exists in many other spiritualities in their own kind of philosophy. The Lamrim contains topics like death and impermanence, karma, why it's advantageous to be a human, developing the good heart. and also a state of being like the nature of reality called emptiness. So that's the philosophy. And that's kind of a Sutrayana approach to getting enlightened. On the other side, in a higher level practice, you might then get initiation and then practice Tantra. And Tantra works more with the subtle energy, like that. But it works best when you've had proper initiation after you've got a good basis of the philosophy. Otherwise, you can go nuts. Seriously. You can get like kind of off base and have a distorted view of it, as I've seen some people that have come to the centers that didn't understand. And so, but Tantra works with the subtle energy, and then with Tantra, you're utilizing the knowledge, building on the knowledge you had from meditations you've done on the philosophy, particularly those on emptiness, the nature of reality. And as you deepen that, you can have a direct perception of emptiness, of that reality, and then everything starts to change dramatically. And then deepening that, you're going to go to deeper states of this consciousness to reach Buddhahood. But you always need to have the bodhicitta motivation as well, meaning I want to do this for the benefit of others. You never want to lose that motivation. So I don't know if that speaks to what you're saying, or...
Yeah, well, to achieve the Buddhahood, you would, I'm assuming you would have to have that intention, because once you become a Buddha, you become omniscient. So.
Yes. But the thing is, there are people that want to learn about emptiness. There's people that want to attain shine, which is calm abiding, a type of meditative concentration, but they're not Mahayanas. They're not on a path to develop bodhicitta like that, and it's quite a different path like that. So that's something that attracted me to this path, because of the good intention. And it doesn't mean other paths that they're not well intended, but I really found this one had kind of the most practice of that, especially the teachers that I met and things like that. So let me just continue about the mind. So let's take a gross moment of mind right now, just to show you the nonlinear experience of the mind in Tibetan Buddhism. Gross moments of mind, for instance, you got to the door of the room, here, you got to the door, and then you had gross moments of mind that once you open the door, that we're starting to, I sense consciousness that is moved by moments of mind, started to take in the room. Okay? And based on your taking in the room, that then causes you to select a seat. And based on you selecting a seat, okay, that's mental consciousness selecting a seat, right? Then there's a decision, and it causes you to put your body in a position to move over to the seat. Is everybody following me? Okay, and then there's moments, and that causes you to then engage your legs and your body to move in a certain way over to the seat, and then that causes you to get yourself in a position in the seat, and then that causes the next moment, which is to sit you down. These are gross moments of mind, and we can follow those. So everybody understand, right? Pretty easy to follow. The subtle moments of mind, I'll take some questions a little bit at the end. The subtle moments of mind are more subtle, very difficult to follow. It's very difficult to trace unless you're really in kind of long meditation, long retreat. So they say in a finger snap, 65 moments of consciousness. 65 movements of the mind in that. Okay? Well, that's pretty subtle. We don't see those fluctuations of the consciousness. Okay? So what we can trace is the gross moments. And you go back and you notice that, well, this particular moment had a moment before it that caused it. This particular moment had a moment that caused it. This particular moment had a moment that caused it. We are going to do a meditation tomorrow called the Continuum of Consciousness. The Continuum of Consciousness. And you trace back these moments, and what you start to discern is every moment has a preceding cause. Every single moment of mind. They don't just pop in there. There's something that caused it that came before. There's something that caused it. Sometimes we appear to have random thoughts. They're not random. There's subtle fluctuations of the consciousness that create that thought to suddenly arise. Things like that. So what happens is you want to know where the first cause is. Where's the first cause? I'm just curious. Anybody?
Intention to come here and learn.
Intention to come here and learn. You mean for coming into this room right now?
Okay.
Okay, I mean, you're using that.
Yeah.
Intention to come here and learn, okay? Anybody else? First cause?
First cause of
Or
what?
let's just say the first cause of your mind.
Sperm and egg.
Sperm and egg, okay, that's material. Can material things cause immaterial things?
Yes.
Other people's experience, first cause of the mind? Where would you say? It takes time to, when we do the meditation, you might come to other conclusions, but
Let's say infinite, without beginning.
without beginning? Without beginning? What do you think of that? No beginning? No first cause?
Buddha philosophy.
Right. Okay, so Tibetan Buddhism would say there's always going to be a preceding cause for something. There's always a preceding cause, which indicates there's no beginning to the mind, no end to the mind, is what they say. Beginningless, endless mind. Very hard for us to conceive of, because we think linearly. Monday's the beginning of the week. January's the beginning of the year. This class started at 7:30. So practically we can engage that way, there's no problem. Okay? But if you can think that every moment, and what you have to do is trace it yourself and notice there's always something that caused something before, and in fact this moment right now is a result of the moment before. And this moment's now the result of this moment. This moment, there's another moment that's a result, and another result. There will always be a subsequent result. So it indicates past and future lives. There will always be a subsequent result, and there's always a preceding cause, is what Buddhism says. You have to check it out yourself. And we will do this meditation tomorrow to just give you some slice. And this is hard because a lot of people don't believe in reincarnation. Okay? They want proof. But I ask you, if you don't believe in reincarnation, where's the proof for that? That there is nothing else. That there was nothing before. Because you don't remember? Let's think about it. Because you don't remember, right? Does anyone remember, I'm just curious, their past lives? Okay, most people do not. Okay? So because we don't remember, how many of you remember being inside your mother when she was pregnant with you? Anybody? Most people don't. Okay, did that not happen because you don't remember? This is ways I chipped it. I didn't believe in reincarnation when I came into Buddhism. This is ways I chipped away and kind of went, huh. Okay, so sorry, you had a question. And you were saying that material things can cause non-material things.
Yeah, I believe this duality stuff is broken. It's all nothing or something.
Okay.
So yes, I do believe.
Okay,
in
so
that
you think
material.
there's a first cause?
I'm of a religious mindset, and I believe in God.
Okay.
So I believe God is the first cause.
Okay, so God's the first
And that's
cause.
different than Buddhism.
Yes. So Buddhism doesn't have a God the creator. And Buddhism, I like it because it puts you in the controls. And I was a big believer in God. And everyone has different ideas about what God means, really. When some people say to me, do you have a God? And I always have to ask them, what do you mean by God? Because sometimes it's exactly what Buddhism says, and sometimes it's really different. But there is no creator concept in Buddhism other than your mind. It comes from your mind, okay? So sometimes when I think of God as a creator, and I'm just kind of picking on you for a moment, it's, for me, the way I understood God, and I don't know your particular religion, God is omnipotent. Is that correct? Is that your
I'm
all-powerful?
Jewish. Yes.
And you're,
I'm Jewish.
okay, so am I.
Omniscient, omnipotent,
Okay.
yes. Oh,
So I was raised with an omnipotent God. I don't know, I suppose omniscient. I never really thought about it that way, but I suppose omniscient, all-powerful. I came from a Jewish background as well. And I'm a, Jubu, practicing Jubu. So what I found interesting, after a while, I had different questions that came up over the years. And one of them was, I suppose, the suffering of young children. So God created that, I was told, and I didn't understand why.
So Judaism doesn't believe that. Judaism holds that all acts of man are the responsibility of man. Suffering of a child is an act of that, either of the child or of someone perpetrating that on the child.
Okay, so I thought about that for a long time. Okay, a child with leukemia that suffers from leukemia and dies at 2 years old. Why? I wanted to know why. So I'm just curious, thinking about God the Creator situation, if God is all powerful, God should be able to fix it. I mean, this is just what I went through my own process. To me, an all-powerful thing, you can do anything. You can do absolutely anything.
Yeah, but even if God is all powerful, it depends on the belief system. You could believe that God gave the consciousness free will, and somehow it got corrupted, either by certain people imprinting certain things out of harmony with truth, or whatever. It got corrupted somehow, and as a result, these things happen. So you can have.
Okay, so then I want to know, okay, fair enough, I want to know how it got corrupted.
Through a conditioning process.
Okay, 2-year-old baby got corrupted in a conditioning process and gets leukemia.
It's because you're imputing suffering to that.
Okay,
That comes from your mind, not
Right.
from the baby's mind.
okay.
Okay, so I don't know what's going on in that baby at that moment. Maybe it is pain.
Mhm.
Pain is not necessarily suffering. Pain is something. What
Right.
happens with that is up to that baby and up to the observer of that baby.
Right.
That's all mankind, that's not God.
Well, I think if you see a young child or a young animal that's whimpering constantly, then, crying and flailing, what kind of, where does that come from, I'm thinking? And
Well,
From-
isn't Buddha teaching us, you, to turn that into something other than suffering? Or aren't
not
we to
in-
dismiss
not
the
in that
suffering
case.
aspect of that? We
no,
can feel compassionate without suffering.
you can feel compassion, but you can't dismiss that the baby's suffering. The first teaching of the Buddha was, there is suffering. That was the number one teaching, Four Noble Truths. There is suffering.
But
It's
it
very
is-
significant, that
It is
one.
what we bring to ourselves by our delusion of what that is. In other words, the detachment from that suffering moment can leave compassion without suffering. I don't know why we have to call what is going on that brings out our compassion suffering. It's pain. Pain is not suffering. It's a struggle. Struggle is not suffering. It's living. Life is not suffering. Being hungry is not suffering.
Okay, I have a different view. I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you at all, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yes,
It's
sir.
not, Tibetan Buddhism doesn't agree with that. It doesn't say, because there is suffering. And this is a tradition that was the first teaching the Buddha gave, and the reason is, he gave it, and I was stunned why he taught that first. I was like, why doesn't he talk about love? This is heavy. The guy gets enlightened, and now this is the first thing. There's suffering? I was dismayed, when I read the stories of... But the thing is, in order to really engage full-on compassion, okay, you have to understand how you suffer. And a lot of it masquerades as something else. And I call it different things. But when I really start to understand and transcend my suffering, then I have huge compassion, because then I know how you suffer. But I know, capital K, know. Okay, because I explored thoroughly my suffering. So for me, I do understand there's terminology things too, where somebody can say, well, that's not really pain, because it's, I know, so I had a friend that went through childbirth and said, no, it wasn't painful, it was intense. And her husband was like, he didn't go through it, but when he was with her and saw the experience, you might label it pain, but yes, everyone does have their own take on things. We have our own perspectives.
Is
But
that suffering?
is what
Is
suffering?
childbirth suffering?
For some people, I would say it is.
Why for some and not for others?
It's based on what's in their mind.
Exactly.
Right.
It's not suffering, it's something that's in their mind.
Right, but for some people, they label it suffering.
The labels are not what we're talking about.
Well, the label could be a delusion.
Yeah,
It could be
exactly,
trans-
exactly.
But
It could be,
I'll
it's
just-
also language, so language is limited.
Language is a
Lang-
delusion.
Language is limited.
But can
Yeah.
I just say,
Language
But
is
not
okay.
getting, but also, I don't want to get too caught up in that to some degree,
It's all
because
conditioned.
this is what we have to use
Yeah,
right now,
I
right?
use the leukemia example, let's assume that the child is in pain and it's a form of suffering at 2 years old. So what's the Buddhist explanation for that effect, that experience? The
So
cause.
the Buddhist explanation would be that that baby in its mind and its consciousness has seeds planted from past lives that created the cause for it to have leukemia and die young.
Okay, so then we go back with infinite regression of one cause giving rise to another. So,
The mind being beginningless, yeah.
but okay, so how then do you solve that problem? How then do you end suffering? That change?
So you end suffering by having a direct perception of emptiness, the nature of reality, and then you see reality very differently. So basically what I'm saying, and let me break it down for a moment, is if you acknowledge this beginningless nature of the mind, to see that my mind is what's creating things, and I now need to take very good care of what I do with my body, speech, and mind. Okay? And by taking care with that, what I'd like to do is make positive imprints in the continuum and in the mind stream. So, according to karma, positive imprints will create future happiness for me, for that mind. Negative imprints in that mind will create suffering for that mind, in this form or another form. Okay? So, basically that's part of the process, is as I'm learning the philosophy, I'm conducting myself with proper ethics, which is taught in the philosophy, and continuing a meditation practice along the side that's going to inform me more and more of how I'm to really view reality, understanding that the way I'm experiencing it now is limited and mostly mistaken. I'm not laying a trip on myself, but I'm just being real that I'm not experiencing reality. Things do not appear the way they exist, and they don't exist the way they appear. So through that process in the meditation, I can develop meditative concentration, apply it to the wisdom realizing emptiness, and have a direct perception of the nature of reality. That cuts all of your suffering.
So, would that be applicable to a 2-year-old baby with leukemia?
No, what the baby would do is in that 2-year lifespan, if it, let's say it didn't suffer a lot, but it died at 2 years old, it would then, that mind, it would be a type of purification, and it might clean something out, and then in the next rebirth it might have a better rebirth with more ability to practice and expand the mind.
But it still would have the same consciousness that supposedly gave rise to the leukemia. But I just want
Yeah.
to
But that whatever gave rise to leukemia would then be burned out by the leukemia, is what Buddhism says, or could be burned out. Negative states and suffering, things that appear to be suffering to us, are seen as a purification in Buddhism. So it's cleaning out some negative tendencies.
I just want to okay, there could be a different cause. I'm sure you would. There could be a different cause, putting aside the past life explanation.
What other cause then? I'm interested, honestly.
Okay, we know that babies who are not valued in childhood, are not fed well and so forth, are not loved, they don't develop in a normal way.
But I know a baby that was very, very loved that got leukemia. Very cared for, had a wonderful birth. The mother was totally healthy.
How do you absolutely know that, though?
Because I know the person, I know the family.
But there's so many unconscious things that get transmitted that you don't really know. But I'm just saying.
It's a pretty good scene, I think.
We know people end up in horrible situations because of the conditioning they went through.
But I know some people that came out of horrible situations and are fantastic.
That's because they probably went through a process to overcome it.
Not necessarily, I think, because they had good seeds in their consciousness. Again, check.
But
I really.
then the Buddhist,
but okay.
The Buddhist explanation is very similar to a lot of religious explanations that there's some kind of super cause in the past that made it happen.
There's no super cause. There's causes every moment. There's no super cause. It's just, now granted, if you kill a lot of people sadistically, that's a heavy negativity. But they don't have super causes and smaller causes, and everything is causing, making imprints in the consciousness. So, one more thing, and then, because we're out of time and I want to continue on, so, feel free, you can poke holes, but I also need to move on with some of the material, because I can't convince you to be a Buddhist or see things this way. I'm just presenting a certain level of information. Please.
The 2-day-old baby that has.
And I just use that as an example. Yeah.
Please, but I think it's a good example. Let's take it, keep it. Two-day-old baby with leukemia or whatever the disease, without any observers at all. Does that baby suffer? If there's no one there to see it, does that baby suffer?
I think it depends on what spirituality you're looking at it from. The Zen tradition would have a different take than Tibetan Buddhism.
Okay.
Honestly, from my understanding.
Okay.
like that. I mean, it's a little bit of what's the sound of one hand clapping, or when a tree falls in the forest, no one's there to listen. Is it, like that? Tibetan Buddhism is very practical, and it would say if you have a 2-year-old baby with leukemia, it's suffering.
The reason I
Yeah.
asked the question is
Yeah, but no.
to separate the actual from the observer. The mind of the observer versus what is really happening. The truth
Yeah.
of that baby's disorder. What is it? Is there any emotion connected to it? And what we attribute to it from our mind,
Right.
our projection or our
Sure.
conditioning.
Yeah.
So that's the question.
Yeah, so I'm just using that as an example for Tibetan Buddhism would see it as suffering and would say that it's generated from the baby's own karma, that it's not a God doing it to it or making it happen, because I find it's just kind of heavy if somebody's creating that, other than yourself, from your own mind. And the other thing is, I just wondered why it couldn't be fixed if there was a God who's omnipotent. Why doesn't that God fix it then? Because all-powerful beings, for me, would be able to fix that. That was a question I had myself when I was thinking about a God, the Creator. I was like, well, they would fix things like that. They would fix the planet from the environmental, desecration and the wars and things like that.
You know that in the Torah, man is given equal responsibility with God for creating the world we are in. So the constant act of, this probably is Buddhist too, the constant act of creating is in every moment. And without those type of opportunities, this kind of creation doesn't happen.
Sure, but then I just think of why doesn't God intervene if He's omnipotent, he or
Because-
she or whatever,
Because then where does our free will and responsibility reside? The gentleman asked the
No,
question.
well, it depends on your...
That's a question in Buddhism as
It
well. Is it
depends
karma or is it free will?
It
Right?
depends on your cosmology, I guess. From his perspective, God creates beings, souls, whatever, and gives them free will, and sets them in motion, and
Mhm.
therefore things can happen that's out of harmony with that create suffering.
And that so things would happen that then create suffering based on man's free will. Man being limited.
Well,
Man,
it depends on your cosmology. I mean, if you coming from the Judeo-Christian, they believe in a fall, like went in the Garden of Eden, like state of consciousness that was perfect. Some fall happened.
And you don't find that heavy? Isn't that heavy?
Well, but the thing
That fundamentally.
I think I find interesting. It's a form of karma. The fall is the original karmic act, and it's the same thing that Buddhists believe. So, like, what's the difference?
We don't have an original karmic act in Buddhism. There's no original karmic act.
Well, you
There's
don't-
fundamental
wait a minute.
ignorance, but there's no original karmic act. It just comes from previous moments of
That's what I mean.
confusion.
And then there's a previous moment that
Right,
gives
and then you
rise to
can
that.
change it. You can change it. Can you change that in Judeo-Christian and become God?
no.
You can, I don't know about Judeo-Christian, but
And become perfect? Can you become perfect?
No.
Okay.
Jesus
That's sad.
no,
I
Jesus
find that very
Christ-
sad and very
Jesus
limited.
Christ supposedly became perfect.
Really, seriously. No.
You can work towards it though, just
Right.
as in Buddhism.
In Buddhism, you can become perfect. You can become a fully enlightened being.
So
And
what about the figure of Jesus? He supposedly became perfect.
Yeah, I think he was a very highly realized being. I think
That's
he
what
was
I'm saying.
very
So
highly
you can,
realized
you can
being.
become a one with God in that tradition.
Right. I wouldn't call it one with God. I would say that he's maximized his potential as a human. It has nothing to do with God.
There was different
You know.
terminology, but I mean,
Right.
the word God could mean this, what you were saying, the term that you're using for emptiness, maybe the omniscient mind.
Right.
Could be the same thing.
If it is that, if you mean that, yeah, that would be similar. If you mean that, so I think some people with God as a creator don't have a different concept. Like there's somebody else doing it to you. There's somebody else that created people, humans, And another thing that I guess I find challenging is something to think about. I've thought about these things I'm not, well versed in all these traditions, but a lot of people I teach suffer from low self-esteem, like tremendous low self-esteem, and it can also mask as egotism. Low self-esteem doesn't mean you just put yourself down. It can also mean you think you're great because you're insecure, okay? So they suffer from this, and a lot of my Buddhist friends that teach, we've debated it. what causes it in Western culture. Asians don't have it as much. I don't know how you feel, but my Asian sisters and brothers, a little bit less. They sometimes feel guilty, but it's not quite the trip that we have, and some of us have come back to original sin. Because in Buddhism, with Buddha nature, you're fundamentally good. Okay, in original sin, you're not. Something went terribly wrong in the beginning, and it's your fault. And it's really heavy. It's really quite heavy for people. So it's just something to think about. So,
I always kind of associate sinning with karma too, because that's what somehow Esteem is connected to Buddhism with the belief in karma, or Hinduism, and then the Judeo-Christian tradition with the belief in sin. It seems like very similar.
okay, it could be, yeah, I think to some degree. To some degree you do something wrong and there's a ramification, yeah. I'd say that's quite similar, yeah. So Buddhism doesn't teach a creator God. The mind is separate, and the other thing is your mind doesn't come from your parents. Okay, your body genetically comes from your parents, and your parents have environmental and conditioning influences on you, but you can see how many of you have children. Are kids like you? Similar personality, behavior to you?
Similar personalities, I can tell a little bit, yes.
And some things different.
Oh, a lot. Yes.
So, and your kids?
Exactly.
Exactly like you, or similar like that.
She said.
So what happens is there's some behavior, some traits. I have some traits like my parents, and some things that are completely different from them. Not even an inkling of an interest that they had. Like I'm a Buddhist nun, for God's sake. There's nobody like me in my family. Not even close. So where does it come from? These are just things to think about, to ask yourself. So the mind not coming from the parents, the mind having its own. I notice my nephews, my sister's kids are 1.5 years apart, 2 boys, in their 20s now. I'm very close with them, 1.5 years apart, night and day. Same parents, same situation. And when they came in, for a very young age, they had these traits already. The younger one is a reader. From the age of 1. I would looking around in the apartment, where is he? Oh, I find him in a corner of one bedroom with a big picture book. Oh, ever since he could crawl, he always went to the bookshelf. Where does it come from? Comes from beginning moments of the mind, like that, from past imprints in that mind. I always ask I wondered, why is he like that? The other one had totally different traits, totally different influences. So just something to think about, this beginningless, endless nature of the mind. And we're going to stop there because we're out of time. Is it 9 o'clock? It ends 9 o'clock. Okay. We're going to stop there, but thank you for the lively discussion. We will have more tomorrow. We start at what time tomorrow? 10 o'clock tomorrow. It's 10 to noon and 2 to 4 or something like that?
10 to 12 and then 12 to 1:30 and then 1:30 to 4.
Okay, we have an hour and a half lunch and then 1:30 to 4. Yeah, thank you. So I hope you can join us tomorrow. And we'll go on, we're going to do some meditations because we'll have a little bit more time. What I'd like you to do, if you can, please, a little homework for a little kind of weekend package for those of you that will be here this weekend, is to make as much meaning in your life, in our tradition, is consider that motivation. See if you can get the motivation going. So when you go to sleep tonight, okay, those of you that have time to practice, please do. I know it's a little later tonight when you get home, but if you can reflect on what we tend to do at the end of the day is reflect on everything that went wrong during the day, what I did wrong. Okay, the negative parts of your ego love that. So the exercise is, first, reflect on what I did well. Every day you can think of something. It can be little. I let the guy in front of me with his car. I did it without any resentment, right? I gave the waiter a bigger tip. I bought somebody flowers. I was a little bit more patient today with that guy at work. Okay, there's something you can think of. I got my husband a cup of tea. And then what you do is rejoice at it, just calmly in a balanced way to yourself. I'm a good person. That was a good thing I did. Spend a little time really rejoicing at the good things. And how about the good qualities that you have? You have many good qualities, okay? And then you can reflect on what didn't go well. What didn't I do that was well? I snapped at that person. I was angry with this person. I was grasping onto that thing I wanted. Right? And those of you familiar with Vajrasattva practice, you can then do Vajrasattva practice focused on that negativity. And if not, determine that I'll either apologize tomorrow to the person, or the next time I see them, or tomorrow. That's my practice. I'm going to be more patient with things like that. You know, and then when you go to sleep, when you lie down to go to sleep, think, I have to sleep for my health right now, to rest my body and mind, and I hope I sleep well, and I hope I wake up refreshed, so that I can continue practicing to hopefully further me along a path to full awakening, so then I can unlimitedly benefit all others. And really, for the purpose of benefiting others, I'm going to practice the yoga of sleeping, then go to sleep. And then when you wake up in the morning, the same thing. Wake up with positive motivation. Okay, we're going to talk about how we wake up tomorrow. I'm curious how you'll wake up tomorrow morning. So set a good motivation, and I hope to see you tomorrow. So I'd like to dedicate any positive energy we've created, any merit we call it, and I'd like to invest that and dedicate it into our being able to sustain or create and develop a consistent meditation practice that will not only benefit our mind, but help us open our hearts and hopefully lead us along a path where we can be of the most benefit to all others. Thank you very much.